Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a game that on paper has everything I want from a game and in theory should be a game I'm raving about. It has Dark Souls-like combat, it has Metroid-like exploration, and it has solid platforming that feels like a mix of Uncharted and Prince of Persia. All those games I mentioned before are some of my favorite games. I've enjoyed each of those games immensely, and each of those games is amongst the best in their respective genre. Combining all these elements should make another game I'm thoroughly enthralled by, however, this isn't what happened, and honestly, this left me pondering why this was the case.
Next time we find one of those plant things, don't go near it.
How else am I supposed to do? We should check that out.
Look alive!
Someone else attack him! Fire all weapons!
Not ready for this.
Not this! He couldn't beat you. I can!
First, before we get into the depths of this conversation, let me get some things out of the way. As a kid, I was a big fan of Star Wars, but I wouldn't consider myself super hardcore. For example, I couldn't name many of the various planets, or names of the weapons, or even some of the lesser-known ships. But I enjoyed the universe, its movies, and even its games, like Star Wars Battlefront and Force Unleashed. However, in recent years, I've kind of fallen out of favor with Star Wars. I didn't like Episode 8 at all, and I haven't seen Episode 9 yet, but I don't think I'd enjoy it that much either, considering how the general reception has been and what I've heard from my friends. I think post-Disney's acquisition of the franchise, I haven't really liked the direction Disney has took the universe. Secondly, I'm a very big fan of Respawn Entertainment. I think they are by far EA's best studio and one of my favorite Western developers. I'm a big fan of their design philosophies as devs and the emphasis they put on a game feeling good to play. Titanfall 2 is one of my favorite shooters of all time, and I also spend a lot of time playing Apex Legends. It's my favorite battle royale game. So even though I'm not too hot on Star Wars right now, the developers of this game kept me optimistic and excited to play it. Okay then, let's move on to my thoughts on this game.
I am terminating your life. Still resisting. Unwise.
So let's discuss this game's biggest and most directly tangible problem. It has a lot of jank, and I mean way more than I'm willing to forgive. Animations being wonky and not looking right, enemies just killing themselves, cutscenes ending awkwardly, and the game not saving your progress sometimes, so you have to redo areas. Weird visual and gameplay glitches that should have never made it to release. I really feel like this game could have benefited from the devs getting a few more weeks or months just fixing bugs and polishing it up a bit. Also, I don't know what's so intensive in this game. I would always get frame drops. Now, I don't have the beefiest machine. I currently game on a GTX 1060, but even on medium settings and at 1080p resolution, I would lose frames. And I can't tell you why. A lot of these planets were peaceful, and in comparison to many other games that came out this year, like Sekiro and Devil May Cry 5, or even the Resident Evil 2 remake, those games I could run at max settings or close to max and keep a steady 60 frames at 1080p on my PC. I'm not sure what's causing these problems. Most of the time it usually happens when there's a long draw distance, so maybe the game isn't loading its maps in an efficient way. But anyways, all of these technical problems really took away from the premium look and feel I expected from a Star Wars game, especially since it's coming from EA and Disney. So I really think that this was unfortunate.
That must have hurt.
Technical problems aside, I think this game had a very solid foundation, and I definitely feel like its heart's in the right place. I can't think of any gameplay mechanics that are outright bad. I think the devs have done a good job at building the game on solid principles. The game never felt like it played itself, which sometimes can be the case for these more cinematic style games. The platforming wasn't super complex, but it definitely still required some timing and asked the player to be an active participant instead of just holding the stick in a direction and the game basically handling all the traversal on your behalf. I think that the platforming and exploration as a whole were the best aspect of this game. The maps were bigger than I expected, and the whole Metroidvania loop and level design never really gets old to me. However, I don't think the game really had any worthwhile loot. All you ever really get from loot containers and secret locations are just skins for Cal, like new ponchos and new color schemes for his clothes, or new color schemes for your droid BD1, or more color schemes for your ship, the Mantis. A thing that I appreciate from this game is that it attempts to really build the lore of these various locations and enemies you fight. Anytime you defeat an enemy for the first time, or you come across a new landmark or carving or point of interest, BD1 will jump off your shoulder and go stand next to it. In that case, you can tell him to scan these areas, and you can find out lore and a bit of the backstory of whatever place you're in or the enemy you just defeated. But honestly, I never got hooked enough to read most of these. I feel like if I was more attached to Star Wars, maybe I would have gotten more fulfillment, but I didn't really feel like it was worth my time. Anyways, outside of that, I don't think anything in this game's world design and as a whole implementation of exploration, that whole loop, none of it really was done in a way that I'd say was noteworthy or wholly unique. It seemed like it followed strong conventions, but it didn't really outdo any of its inspirations.
A Jedi. This is what I've trained for. Glory to the Emperor! Quit running.
Let's move on to the combat. Again, this is also another aspect of this game that has strong fundamentals, and it shares many of the pros discussed in the platforming. The game has solid combat that's built on the foundation that was really popularized by the Souls games, where you have right stick targeting and you need to be more tactical than traditional action games to succeed. The game implements the core of this combat pretty well, and the force powers add a little bit more diversity to the combat abilities. But here too, I felt like the game didn't do anything exceptional. This game's block mechanic is similar to the ones that you would find in Dark Souls, where you have a stamina meter, and every single time you get hit, it drains a portion of that meter. And like Neo or Sekiro, you can also parry enemies to allow you to break their guards and do large bursts of damage to them. However, I for some reason just never got a feel for this parry. There's a short delay between pressing the block button and Cal actually entering the block stance, and this delay took some getting used to. But then the same delay doesn't occur when you remove the block button. So when you release it, Cal automatically just exits block stance. So it was pretty common for me to anticipate blaster fire, and I would click in the block and I would deflect the first shot, and then I would remove the block expecting the same delay, but instead I would get hit by the second shot because that same delay doesn't occur on the releasing portion of the block. But that's not too big of a deal. I imagine that a lot of people could get used to that. I think I got used to it at the very end of the game, and it wasn't that big of a problem for me then. But another part of the combat that I do think was designed poorly was how they went about telling you about unblockables. Now, a tell is how the game basically informs you that a certain attack is about to happen. And in this game, if an enemy is about to do an unblockable, they'll flash red. This isn't an uncommon way to do this. Several games usually use a color flash to let you know that this is about to occur. But the thing is, if an enemy kills you, the one that killed you will glow gold the next time you see them, and until you strike them to retrieve your XP and your HP back, that red flash from blocking won't appear on them because the gold color that's put on them kind of overshadows the flash that's supposed to inform you about unblockables. I'm surprised this made it into the game. It seems like an obvious problem and seems like something that the devs would have already came across and would have had found solutions around, so I'm a little disappointed by that. The last part of the combat that I want to talk about are the force abilities. Now, again, force abilities, just like the other portions of the combat I've mentioned, are also generally implemented well. They're mapped in an intuitive way where each trigger is in charge of either a pushing or pulling, and then one of your bumpers is in charge of slowing an enemy. But outside of doing some creative kills like pulling an enemy to their death or pushing them off a cliff, I didn't feel like the force powers were used to the extent their potential allows. I want to compare this game's implementation to the way that Star Wars The Force Unleashed did it back in the PS3 era. Now, I know these games are tackling the force from opposite ends. In Star Wars Force Unleashed, you're playing a very powerful force user, and he's a Sith at the start, and he approaches the force from the dark side. Cal, on the other end, is a Padawan. He hasn't mastered the force, and he's supposed to be a Jedi, so he should be more restrained. I understand that. For that reason, the combat is pretty restrained, and there's very few over-the-top or super aggressive actions you can take, but I feel like the ability to freeform, pick up anything, and move things in Force Unleashed really made you feel like you were partaking in the actions of being a Force user. I think of Control, which came out in August of 2019, and that game had a similar thing where you could just pick up and pull chunks of the wall or any object in the world, and it really made you feel like you had freeform use of this power, that this power was deeply connected to you in some way. Like, it felt fundamental to how you went about interacting with this world. And I just feel like that's where this game could have used a little bit more of a push in terms of how it decided to go with its use of the Force. Aside from the technical and mechanical foundation of the combat animations in this game are pretty basic. They seem like simple sword strikes. Cal isn't doing many outlandish and show-offy moves. I understand why they decided to go this way. He's supposed to be a Padawan, and then he's supposed to be a Jedi, so there's that whole restrained nature to the Jedi that he needs to sort of adhere to. But I feel like they could have at least used some way to show him grow and become, I guess, a little bit more flashy as the game goes on by giving him new moves that kind of showed the potential that he had, but that never really happens. The game does decide to give you new forms to your lightsaber, so you start off with a single-sided lightsaber, but eventually you can use a two-sided lightsaber like the ones that Darth Maul uses in Episode 1. And then even farther in the game, you can get an upgrade that lets you split into separate sabers and use them dual-wielded. But I never felt like these styles really added that much to the game. The game tells you that some are better for crowd control and others are better for picking off an enemy one at a time, but honestly, I never found myself having the need to use anything other than the single-sided lightsaber, and the single-sided lightsaber does more damage than the dual-sided lightsaber, so even if there was a crowd around me, I could probably pick them off fast enough with a single-sided lightsaber that the benefits that the crowd control of a double-sided lightsaber provided me never really became a big factor. I think that kind of just left the combat feeling strong in terms of its mechanical basis. There's not much in it that's poorly implemented, but it's not as satisfying as I would have expected from the pedigree of the people making it. Respawn Entertainment is known for the smooth feel of their games, and Titanfall has a feel that just seems so tuned to perfection. And the director of this game, Stig, worked on God of War 3 before this game. And God of War 3 has a spectacle that I think most games, even coming out today, can't compete with. This game lacks those qualities, which just leaves its combat feeling good at the base, but there's nothing that makes it stand out.
What do you want with Toff?
Jedi business.
Jedi are dead.
Not all of them.
You get that off a corpse?
My master gave it to me.
Lastly, the story of this game. It isn't bad overall. It has a solid premise about finding an artifact which contains the locations of Force users across the galaxy, and I think that is a solid goal for both the protagonists and the antagonists of the story to achieve. However, I don't think this game really has strong dialogue and the writing to carry it. A lot of the exposition and character building for various cast members is just told to you pretty directly, and the game has a problem of being overly dramatic at times, which doesn't raise it to a higher caliber of storytelling in the medium. It's serviceable, and it gives purpose to your adventure, but it really excites. I think that the main cast is solid. I especially like BD1 and your pilot, Grease. I also think that the second sister is a pretty cool antagonist with a very cool visual design and a satisfying conclusion to her arc. However, none of the cast members is a standout in terms of other pretty cool and memorable characters in the Star Wars universe. Thus, for a third time, I just feel like this game has a solid base, but nothing to really push it over the edge. And I think this brings me to my realization while I was playing this game.
There will be times when emotion, pain, or exhaustion trick you. You will feel cut off, isolated. This is an illusion.
This game has great parts, and it's built on good design principles. However, it rarely rises above the parts it copies from its inspirations. I don't think there's a single thing in this game that it does better than its inspirations. There's a saying that something is better than the sum of its parts. I think Jedi Fallen Order is the opposite of this, or at least fell short of this. Jedi Fallen Order copies excellent games and implements their various mechanics and features functionally and serviceably. None are done poorly or outright badly, but there is nothing done here that really stands out or feels noteworthy. It is a solid game, but it is also an unmemorable one. So this got me wondering, is it more enjoyable to me to have a game that has flaws and has aspects of it that are done poorly, but along with that has certain aspects of it that are done very uniquely or in ways that are wholly their own? I feel like sometimes a game can be more enjoyable to me when, along with it having bad parts that I'm not a fan of, it has other parts that I can wholly call unique about it and reference to it when I think of something that feels new or feeling like it's doing something that really gives it a strong sense of identity. And so, honestly, I'm not sure where I stand on this, because I feel like I could think of other games that don't do anything wholly unique and just execute something pretty well that I hold very dear. But I was just trying to wonder why this game, even with its solid execution of most of the things it does, I didn't feel like that strong connection or pull to it. I'm not sure where I lie on that discussion, but I guess that's what this whole review brought me to, this conclusion. And I feel like as I play games in the future, I'm going to look back at this and see where I lie. Okay, so that was my review of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Overall, not a bad game. If you're into Star Wars, I'd say check it out. If you're not into Star Wars, maybe the games this game's copying are of your interest. And in that case, you still might want to check it out. The reason I made this review wasn't because this game spoke out to me more than other games. It's mainly I'd recently finished it and I had these thoughts in my head and I wanted to share them. And that's kind of the point of this video. I'm not trying to be a critic. I'm more just trying to share ideas and learn new skills. I'm trying to improve my weaknesses, like speaking in public or hearing myself. But that's sort of the goal of these videos. And if you guys have tips, helpful words, criticisms, please let me know. Thank you. Hopefully I'm making more of these in the future. Anyway, you guys have a good day. Bye.